we are holding a scientific workshop as part of our Journée québécoise des lésions médulaires 2018. The objective of this event is to develop a better collective understanding of the impact pressure sores can have on the daily life of those living with a spinal cord injury, and also to identify recommendations and priorities for research and investment for the future in Quebec.
I would like to thank the Rick Hansen Institute for to help for contribution in this event. Thank you very much, John, Tom, Bill.
We are just delighted to be able to participate and support this initiative. Pressure injuries are the #1 most expensive preventable medical error in the health system. And for anybody who's had one, or if you've known anybody who's had one, there are really, really awful things to have to endure.
So my name is Ben Albright. I'm a family physician and I've adapted to serve a community of community-dwelling spinal cord lesion patients. And I do predominantly wound care at the Institut d'adaptation Jacques de Montréal. I experience a lot of difficulty in treating my patients who are community-dwelling, and I want to identify 3 of the key things I think we can do to improve the quality of wound care in Canada. One thing I think we need to do is to see more emphasis on research on community-dwelling spinal cord lesion patients, that we have a lot of existing research on pressure ulcers for hospitalized and institutionalized patients. We don't see a lot on how we can be treating our patients who are still living in the community. Secondly, I think we need to do more to be able to adapt to the lives of our patients who are frequently highly impacted by the necessity to be bedbound during the treatment of their wounds. Frequently that they are having difficulty continuing to live their daily lives and pursue their activities of daily living while they are being treated for their wounds, and we need to see more adaptations that allow them to continue to be engaged in the community while their wounds are healing. And third, I think we need to look at avenues of communication. In the clinic I work in, I'm working with a variety of health sectors in Montreal and dozens upon clinics, and being able to disseminate the information on how to care for the specific population to all those different health workers is a big challenge. And so I think these are the 3 priorities that we could identify in order to treat spinal care patients with pressure sores.
So my name is Thérèse Laramée. I'm a physiotherapist and I have been working as a physio at the spinal cord injury program here in Montreal at the Institut de réadaptation Jacques, and I'm also a clinical research coordinator. So I've been working in research as well, but I am not a researcher, and the fact that actually today I'm the one speaking about research is meaning that there's not so many researchers here in Quebec that are specialized in spinal cord injury and pressure ulcers. So my presentation, what I wanted to show is sort of an overview of what is done in terms of research here in Quebec and also in the rest of Canada. So the first piece that researchers have looked at is really to do a portrait, a first observation that the research were more concerned about epidemiology. So looking at incidence and prevalence of pressure ulcers, looking at who develops the pressure ulcers, what are the risk factors. And also another point is looking at the prevention and also the treatment. But if we look more thoroughly at the incidence and prevalence, what we can see is that some numbers have been quite stable over time. So for example, 25% of patients arriving from the acute care hospitals, whether they have developed their pressure ulcer in the acute care or prior to the arrival in acute care, are arriving in rehab with a pressure ulcer. Also, we know that the prevalence, so the number of persons with spinal cord injury who have a pressure injury, is around 35%. So right now, 35% of persons with SCI have a pressure ulcer. And also, we know that once you have one pressure ulcer, you have a really higher chance of developing a second one. If we look more now at the prevention, a little bit has been done here in Montreal and in Quebec City, and also through the Spinal Cord Injury Knowledge Mobilization Network, who has been sponsored by the Rick Hansen Institute and the Ontario Neurotrauma Foundation. The work we have done is for the 6 rehab centers across Canada who worked in that network. We have looked at our practices, and we have changed all the prevention strategies that we had, and we have seen that the incidence has been decreasing. The incidence of the number of people who are developing a pressure ulcer during rehab has decreased. Also, we looked at all the educational program that we are offering, and again, we have the impression that sometimes we are not hitting the target, but we know that giving all that information to patients prior to their discharge is a crucial point. The third aspect is treatment. We mainly have looked at the e-stim, so electrical stimulation, for the treatment of pressure ulcers. So finally, I gave references of best practice guidelines and some articles that are recent that we can look at in our search for better results for pressure ulcers.
My name is Jacques Comeau, and I'm presenting here as a quadriplegic since 42 years, as well as the integration counselor with MÉMO-Quebec. I spent my part of the presentation just talking about my experience as a spinal cord injured person with my first bed sore. It happened 15 years into my 42 years as a person in a wheelchair. I found it took 18 months to get past that situation. I talked about my experiences with different doctors, different approaches, how the lack of having the professional expertise of spinal injury was a big detraction from the whole process, and that the people nowadays have to be very much aware that information is available to them, and they should really focus on that when they finally have the need.
So over the past hour, we were discussing a few different the issues related to pressure injuries and a few of the different things that we think that we should be looking at in terms of further research and such. Two of these were related more to knowledge translation, and the first of which was looking more at the front lines and about getting the information out to the caregivers who are providing the care in the community, and to the individuals, whether you call them clients or consumers, who are looking at the information and looking at the various ways that they obtain the information and the education. And another one is concerning the transfer of this knowledge and the scaling of it in the community. So looking at the best practices and how to best scale it across the province between institutions. And the third area that we were really looking at was to do with measuring the ROI, or the impact, the cost-benefit analysis of this, in order to help build the case to government for funding different initiatives. I think that there was one notable thing that we were talking about was that this is a fairly specific problem, and to look at more general systems that might be useful, that we might be able to use, that are more common, to be able to make it more a bigger return on investment. And this is where we were talking about things like having a phone line for pressure injuries, but maybe using Info Santé that would direct you to this line, because Info Santé is more generalized amongst the population, so more accessible.
Yeah, so it is, for me, it was my first exposure to pressure injuries and the prevalence of them. So it was kind of shocking to see how prevalent it is, as well as how much impact it has in lives on people with spinal cord injury, especially the economic impact once we started digging into the numbers. And for me, the biggest element that I learned from a research perspective was how many, still there's many gaps in the research, especially in getting the knowledge into the hands of both people living with spinal cord injury and how they can empower themselves in being active agents in their care, and also from the clinician perspective, from the rehab specialist to the medical doctors, and what tools are necessary, how can they better help the individuals living with spinal cord injury in the management and their care of their pressure injuries. So it looks like there's a lot of research to get done in order to really enhance the lives and reduce potentially even the cost of the healthcare system. So those are the things I felt I saw the most interesting aspect from a research perspective in my eyes as well.
We need more research on treatments to better optimize the wound healing process and make sure that a stage 2 wound won't get to a stage 4 or a stage 1 won't go into a stage 2, right? So in prevention, but also in treatment. So that was one of the avenues that we wanted the research to go into. And we talked about the research on psychological impacts and psychosocial impacts of wounds.
How it affects the family and the care providers, not just the individual, but the people that are around them and support them.
Globally, there's the idea of having the information circulate more fluently, so that it's actually the benefits of prevention programs can be more evident to government, so they can have like the real data that to show the benefit of having great prevention programs, so they can make save more money with the actual cost.